Hello, everyone. This is your girl, Sade, reporting live from the Win in STEM podcast. Thank you for tuning into another episode. For our first-time listeners, Win in STEM is a platform to highlight successful people of color STEMists to show others how to get a seat at the table and win in science, technology, engineering, and math. I hope you all have been enjoying the STEM Career Path series. So far, we've covered 2 careers and we have plenty more to go, so you still have time to catch up. I'm really excited for today's career, which is product management. I feel like this is a field that many people have been transitioning into, especially those from a non technical background. My guest for today is Janet Phan. She is a senior technical product manager at Amazon and the founder of a STEM mentoring nonprofit called Thriving Elements. I don't want to share too much about her. I want her to be able to introduce herself later. But one thing that really stood out to me about her is that she is a strong STEM advocate, and her goal is to ensure that all young women and girls are recognized that they're capable of having a seat at the table for whatever field they're interested in. And this perfectly aligns with the mission of the Win in STEM podcast. So thank you, Janet, for being a guest today.
Thank you for having me, Sade, and thanks for creating this platform for future STEMinists and aspiring STEMinists, and as well as current STEMinists who are looking to explore other areas in STEM.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So I know I briefly introduced you, but usually on my podcast, I like to give my guests the opportunity to introduce themselves. So basically, unapologetically telling our listeners who you are, what you do, share any accomplishments, all the good stuff. This is your time to shine, and the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, Sade. And to the Win in STEM listeners, my name is Janet Phan. I am a daughter of Vietnamese refugees. And for me, it was very difficult to navigate the American education and professional system. And so if you look into thrivingelements.org or boldly-u.com, you'll see why mentoring has been a huge part of my life, and to get into the STEM field, in particular the technology field. So I graduated with a bachelor's in information systems and finance, did an IT internship at a company called Warehouser that's local here to Seattle. And during that IT internship, I realized how much I loved technology, not necessarily because I wasn't sure if it was because I actually loved technology or if it was the team that I was on. But the IT internship, the people, the leadership, they were really great and provided me a lot of support and empowered me to take on a whole program to lead and deliver. So to those listeners who host IT interns, definitely you are very influential to the start of a young person's career. So make sure that you create a very well rounded, empowering internship opportunity. And then after my internship, I worked at Boeing in their IT organization for about 4.5 years. Got to live in Chicago at their corporate headquarters for a couple of years. And that was also very empowering to be able to work in the office of the CIO. CIO stands for Chief Information Officer. And then during that time at Boeing, I got to get my master's in information systems because I loved it so much. And then shortly after that, I transitioned into a career in tech consulting. And in fact, my IT internship mentor later went over to a tech consulting firm called PwC. And then he recruited me over to PwC. And that's where I got an opportunity to travel the world, have clients in Belgium and India, South Africa, France, Germany, and which later led me to have a project in Switzerland for 6 to 12 months to implement a platform that I had already worked to implement in South Africa and in France. And that 6 to 12 months became 5 years, where I got the opportunity to be the Europe, Middle East, Africa technology program leader to implement a global program that PwC had going on. So it had led me to lots of opportunities. And somewhere during that time, as I had already mentioned to you all, that mentoring is a big part of my life. And that's how I started Thriving Elements, which is the mentoring program for underserved, underrepresented girls in STEM that Sade had mentioned about in the beginning. And I recently launched a book called Boldly You. It's a story about discovering what you're capable of when you show up for yourself.
Mhm.
And we can talk more about that later.
Awesome. That was a lovely introduction.
Thanks.
And I love how you highlighted the importance of mentorship because that is something that is also like near dear to my heart. And I kind of use the podcast as an informal mentoring for those who I can't reach across the world. So, listeners, if you don't have a mentor, definitely go out and seek a mentor within your organization, work, just to help you in your STEM career.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because and you're creating this platform to almost scale your mentoring and for
Mm.
like with this series for your listeners to understand the breadth of STEM fields. And the mentoring isn't taught in schools, how to get it, what it means. And as I travel around the world, more and more people have heard the word mentoring, but they don't really know what it means or how to engage. So if your listeners are interested, I have a TED Talk called Three Key Elements to Thriving Mentorship. So you can
Mm.
check that out. And then there's a Harvard Business Review HBR article on it as well.
I'll definitely include that in the podcast description so
Yeah.
people have easy access to it. Cool. So let's dive in. So, right now, there's product, project, program management, and sometimes it's a blurred line, and people don't really know the difference between them. Can you explain what the difference is between a product, project, and a program manager?
Yes, and I can define it based on my experience, and I think it's a blurred line on purpose. I think in STEM field and as you get into these types of roles, you should never think of yourself as only a program manager, only a product manager, and that you don't have any other responsibilities. I think at a high level to grow in your career, you you almost don't want your role so defined. Rather, where do you see the gaps in the project that you're working on or in the organization, and what can you do to fill those gaps? So, for example, with product management, you're really responsible for a either a physical product and all the things around it. For example, how do your customers function with that product and how will they get support on the product if there's an issue? What will your customers want in the future? How do you think beyond about what it is that they will need? And for project and program management, so with project, it's one project and you're delivering something that's very narrow, a narrow scope, and a program manager manages a bunch of projects underneath them. So there's a higher strategy for the organization, for the company that needs to be delivered. And there are many work streams that need to be delivered. And so each of those work streams have projects underneath them. And that's where the program
Mhm.
manager comes in. And going back to product, so I did talk about like the physical product, but a product can also be a service, like a cloud service. For example, Netflix.
Mm.
Netflix is a service that where they have product managers, but within there, you can start parsing out the various pieces. Maybe you're the product manager of Netflix movies or Netflix shows, so those types of things. So it doesn't have to be a physical product.
Okay, I'm glad that you highlighted that product doesn't really have to be a physical product. It can definitely be a service.
Well, yeah, well, just like your podcast is your product. So you would essentially be the
Hmm.
product manager of your podcast. You're providing this career series, and that is what you're anticipating your listeners want. And so what will they want next after this?
So, how did you get into the field of product management? I know you briefly talked about it in your bio. You had a mentor who sought you out, but can you go into detail?
Yes, so a lot of my career has been in technical program management, and it's just I've always grown up wanting to execute, get things done, and how do I break a larger goal into small tasks. And so
Mm.
I got into technical program management by using what I enjoy doing and find satisfaction in getting small actions done. And so that translated into when I started my career in technology. So, for example, with the IT internship, it was a business analyst role, but I found myself not only taking on business analyst responsibilities, meaning working with the customers, what are their requirements, figuring out based on their business needs, what technology needs are there so that I could help them with their business. But then beyond that, I put a project together and put timelines and milestones together. Well, how do I get this technology developed? Who do I need to bring in? Do I need to bring in a systems architect? Do I need to bring in an engineer? And then at some point, a cybersecurity person to make sure that the platform is secure? Do I bring legal if this platform is external facing? So all the things, and I love seeing all of that. So overseeing all of that and being and having my fingers in all the pots. And so when you talk about product management, it's really going back to that business analyst role and building that relationship with the stakeholders, being so customer obsessed, but also understanding the technology and how do you deal with the conflicting priorities. So
Mm.
if I was to answer how I got into product management, it was definitely through my role being a technical program manager and when I was interviewed at Amazon for a role. And this applies to, there's another HBR article that I recently released around apply anyway, even if you don't meet all of the job requirements. But originally it was a technical program manager job that I was interviewing for. And through the interviews, they saw a gap in what they needed filled and the skills that I was able to bring to the table and offered me the product management role.
Yeah, I like what you said that when you're applying to positions, you don't need to have all the requirements. I tell people that all the time, like, don't be intimidated
Hmm.
by the job rec. If you have at least 70%, still apply. You never know.
Exactly.
If it's not that particular job, it will definitely open doors for another opportunity.
Hmm. Hmm. Exactly.
Mhm.
And which is what happened for me to get into this industry that I've been wanting to get into for the past 2.5 years. And I fought and fought my
Mm.
way in and LinkedIn stalked people, and yes, I made it.
So I know you just previously started your new role as a senior technical product manager. What is a day like? You can talk about your current role or your previous role as a program manager? What was your day to day? I mean, even challenges that you faced.
Yeah, my day to day is so exciting. I love that every morning I wake up, whatever I'm doing, I know that it's tying back and getting us closer to getting internet connectivity to these communities that don't have it, or enable healthcare, or enabling farmers in these rural areas across the world. So that's how I start my day, knowing that. And then I go into our lab where we're building the satellites or testing various components of the satellites. I'm talking to the various engineers, so electrical engineers, hardware engineers, solar panel engineers, all types of engineers who contribute to the various components of the satellites, and making sure that they have the proper network connectivity, the proper compute and storage for them to run the testing of the data that comes from testing. Because you can imagine if they're trying to beat up a component, because our satellites are supposed to last in space for 7 years. So
Mhm.
simulating that, you can imagine the amount of data that comes out. So
Mhm.
that's for me the most exciting part, and being able to see the satellite coming together. The other component would be working with the engineers, as well as other technical program and product managers, cybersecurity folks who are working on the applications that allow the whole factory, the whole lab to run. So imagine applications such as, what are the different components on the satellites? How do you store that data? What version of software is on each of the components? What type of computer image is on there? What type of operating system? Has it been tested? Oh, are there patches that need to happen? Patches are upgrades that need to happen for the various softwares that are in the different components. So there's always a lot going on, and that's what I love about it, because no day is the same. And there are always challenges where you work with super, super smart people to figure out a solution. So some of the challenges that I do face day to day is, because I have so many internal stakeholders, then we have, and they want to improve X or improve Y, and there's conflicting priorities. So then I have not
Mm.
only conflicting priorities with my stakeholders, but also the engineers who are building me the thing or the set of things. So that it's really a song and dance, and trying to figure out, how do I make both parties happy.
Yeah, I definitely understand with the conflicting priorities. Even me as a systems engineer, we our goal is to create a product for a customer, and there are times where the customer changes their mind. They want to add new features or they want to take things out.
Hmm.
And sometimes you really have the conversation like, are you sure? You already paid X amount of money, or it's already too late in the product life cycle to make any additions or remove anything. So yeah, I definitely feel you on that challenge with stakeholders.
And that's where you, as a systems engineer, I don't know if you are working with one, if you can and have the luxury of working with a product manager, then they can help facilitate all of that, so you can focus on being a systems engineer, focus on the design and the roadmap of how you want to design this particular system. But I also know systems engineers who love working with the customers as well. It's rare, but it's a really good quality to have in a systems engineer if they have it.
Yeah, definitely. So I know that you transitioned from program management to product management, but through your journey, your STEM journey, what are the deal breaking skills that helped you be successful?
I think two. come to mind. And the first one is building relationships, either with
Mm,
external customers, internal customers, with the engineers, with the marketing folks, communications, HR, all of it. Just building relationships and taking time to build a rapport with people. Because with product management there and program management, there's so many moving parts, and you want to be able to genuinely like have a relationship with these folks so that one, not only work with them, but also disagree with them. And when you have built that relationship and you disagree on an approach because you believe it's the right thing to do, then they know that you're truly disagreeing on the idea and that it's not them, so they don't take offense. And so sometimes I
mhm,
think people fall into the trap of, oh, well, that person didn't like my idea. Well, it's not about you. It's about the business, it's about the customers, and we're going to speak up and create a safe environment where you can speak up. And having that safe environment is, I also think, is a luxury. But you can build that for yourself by building these relationships with the people that you work with.
mhm,
The other piece would be, I'd say, my relentless passion to deliver and be biased for action. So,
mm,
that means, again, I'll go back to how do you take this big goal, like we want to get internet connectivity to the world. How do you break it up into bite-sized chunks so that there are clear actions and steps that need to be taken? Who's the owner for it? When are we going to get it delivered? And that also goes back into building the relationship with the people that you're working with, because if you as a systems engineer, you're working with a project manager and they're like, oh, Sade, you need to get this done by end of August. And then after that, the next milestone is we need to do penetration testing and we need to get that done by mid-September. And you're like, what? Excuse me, like, why are you telling me what to do? So
mhm,
the approach of that project manager or program manager or product manager coming to you and saying, hey, this is what we need to do. What's your availability? How does it fit into your sprints? And having it more of a conversation rather than you need to do XYZ.
mhm. And even for like our listeners who might not be interested in transitioning into PM, I think these are still important skills that you can apply individually to other roles. So definitely you can learn a lot from what we're sharing.
Oh, absolutely. I think to be successful in any role, you must you must be biased for action to get your work done.
Mhm. So, for those who want to get into product or program management, what are like the pathways and strategies you recommend for people to break into this field?
I think a role that has very low barrier to entry would be an analyst role. Business analysts are always needed, and business like systems analysts, they are the ones who really work with the customers, ask them what requirements they have from a business standpoint, but they also understand the technology. And even if you don't understand the underlying technology, you can at least help out engineers and architects by being so customer obsessed of
Mhm,
what are these business requirements and breaking them down and organizing them, so that you can hopefully translate it into the engineers and the systems architects. So business analyst role would be a good pathway. The other one would be around project management. That is also a highly sought after skill. And like I just talked about, how do you manage various stakeholders, putting milestones together, holding people accountable, negotiating with people when they are going to finish the thing that they have committed to doing. Um, those two roles combined allow you then to be a great product manager.
Is there a technical degree required as well?
I think, well, my background is in information systems, but I have known of many folks who have transitioned into these roles, so it's not necessary. But I really like that you mentioned earlier that you're going to do a product management course.
Mhm.
And those are always helpful because it gives you the framework and it's not that long. So it allows you to understand the lingo at a high level. Other experience that you may want, again, I think with the project management, if you find yourself right now in communications or HR or even healthcare, right? What are you doing to manage the projects? Like if you're in healthcare, how are you managing your patients? And there's step A, B, C, D. And if you can talk about that and translate it into a career where you want to work with technology, for example, maybe healthcare applications, then you can translate your ability to organize steps to get a bigger goal completed. That would be the experience. Or even if you're younger and just starting out your career or in college, how can you demonstrate that you've led an event and all the things that go into event planning or leading a community service event? That's all project management. And that's what employers are
Mhm.
looking for. What did you do? What did you do when you were asked to lead a community service project that you've never led before? And most companies want to see somebody who's curious and will find a way. And so
Mhm.
there's so many YouTube videos out there, articles on Google that can help get you, give you the tools to do what
Mhm.
you need to do, even if you've never had the experience before.
And also, I think sometimes like these roles or people that are hiring, they're really looking for how you can tailor your current skills to that new role that you're looking into. Like you said, planning events. People probably are not thinking of that as experience, but the skills of problem solving, budgeting, coming up with like risk and opportunities and planning and customer relationships. Those are all skills that you have from that event planning experience that can help open doors for that product, project, or program management role that you're looking into.
And you definitely hit it with the problem solving. Like, how do you show that you know how to solve problems or can go through the process of solving a problem with the resources that are around you and not say,
Mhm.
okay, I give up. There's nothing that can be done. And do you have the tenacity, the endurance, the persistence to overcome that problem and work with the right people or work through the people to figure out who needs to be involved?
And then, like you said, there's tons of resources out there: YouTube, Google. There's Coursera, edX,
Mhm.
Khan Academy. There's so many others out there, even boot camps to help you get in the door of the field, and even like certifications as PMPs, Agile certifications, Scrum. So
Exactly.
Google, YouTube will be your best friend.
Another one I think would be a great like hands-on experience if your listeners have time is there are many nonprofits out there that are always looking for
Mm.
volunteers, and it's risk-free for them if you can come in and volunteer to lead a particular project. For example, with my nonprofit Thriving Elements, we needed a customer relationship management system implemented. That means it needed to be configured, get all the data from our spreadsheets in there about our mentors, mentees, volunteers, etc. And I had met this young woman surfing in Portugal, and we were just talking about what we're doing. And I was sharing with her about Thriving Elements. She asked, well, how can I help? And I said, well, we really need a CRM system. She didn't even know what CRM was. And I said, well, based on our surfing experience so far, I think you can do what it takes and do the research to figure out how to implement it. And so and that was about 2 years ago. And today she leads our whole CRM strategy. She does all the configurations, builds automations on the back end, and yeah, manages all the people that are the people data that are inside of it. And so that's why I strongly believe build your muscle in these soft skills, like we've been talking about, building relationships, being biased for
Mhm.
action. How do you solve problems? How do you have the endurance to go through with solving these problems when it becomes hard? Because the technology is there. It's not rocket science. There is so much
Mhm.
documentation and videos on how to do the thing. I mean, she did it for us. And so that I would encourage if your listeners have the capacity to take a project on the side with a nonprofit, for example, with Thriving Elements, or any other nonprofits if they're interested in the American Cancer Society or the Rescue Mission, Animal Rescue Mission, whatever it may be, reach out to your local community organizations and they can definitely use your help.
Wow, thank you for identifying that. That never crossed my mind to reach out to nonprofits and using it's like a win-win.
Mm,
You're
oh,
helping a
for sure.
nonprofit, their mission, the organization, and then on the flip side, you're gaining experience to put on your resume. So,
Yep, and so many people have reached out to me for other opportunities like, "Oh, I'm wanting to learn how to be a brand strategist. Can I use your nonprofit to do that? Oh, I wanna exercise my social media skills. Can I, run your social media?" Like, "Sure, go ahead and try."
wow, that's amazing. Thank you for
Mhm.
that. So I know STEM as a whole, there is a lack of diversity. And one of my missions for When in STEM is to increase the representation. With tech product or tech management roles, do you see a lack of diversity in there as well?
I think there has and continues to be a lack of diversity. It's very clear that there's a huge gender disparity in STEM
Mm, yeah.
fields. I also think there's diversity from, well, you're a systems engineer, so like from a user perspective, someone maybe who comes from a European background versus a Southeast Asian or an African background, maybe they think about the usability, their user experience differently than somebody who's American. And so that's why I love your messaging with this tech series is, how do we increase the knowledge of the breadth of STEM roles that are available, but also the need for the breadth of experiences, backgrounds, that can contribute to the success of either a physical product or a cloud service for people to use. And I always think of, I believe there was, I won't say the company's name, but there was a phone that was released and it didn't recognize faces. It had Face ID and it recognized dark faces. It's like, well, who
Mm,
was in the room to test and design this? And so,
mhm.
and that's why we need to continue to get more diversity of not only like BIPOC backgrounds, but from cultural backgrounds as well to in order to make the technology successful.
Yeah. In order to create a great product, you need diversity of minds, right? You need people from different backgrounds, genders to help shape that product of tomorrow with their experiences and expertise. And that's the only way to launch a great product. Just
Mhm.
diversity is needed.
Exactly.
So this is our last question. In our product management track, what is like the ultimate step on the career ladder?
I think the ultimate step um, in a lot of these larger tech companies like the Googles, the Microsofts, Amazons, is to be a principal like product manager. That means you're not in so much in the nitty gritty anymore, but you're there to review all of what are the other product managers bringing to the table. And just like there are
Mhm,
principal engineers or principal program managers, but I wouldn't say there's only just like one ultimate step. It's where do you want to take your career in that organization after
mhm,
achieving a very senior product management role or a senior technical program manager role. Maybe You can become, if you have aspirations to be an executive, a VP of the organization, and even chief operating officer. Most program managers are great with operations, but then there are also program managers who are great with strategy. So then they can be on a VP track or even a CEO track, or the head and lead of that product or that program.
Thank you for identifying that. I know that's a major question from our listeners asking, okay, once I get into this role, what's the next step? As we round up, thank you, Janet, for this discussion. How can our listeners connect with you for follow up or to ask you more questions about your nonprofit, the book you mentioned? Spill us all the details.
Well, first of all, thanks for, I know you're going to be listing all the various URLs. You can connect with me through thrivingelements.org, or there's a contact form on boldly-u.com. You can email me directly at janet@thrivingelements.org. And I'm also available on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. So there are many ways to contact me, and I look forward to hearing from your listeners.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you once again so much. This was very informational. And I know product management, program management was one of the career requests from our listeners to be highlighted. So I'm sure they'll be happy and will be reaching out to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to say, like, one more piece of advice for those going into product roles. There is a platform called Stellar Peers, STELLARPEERS. And that is where you go in and can set up mock interviews. They also have
Ooh.
documentation around the format of interviews and how you should approach a systems design question, for example. But that has really helped me get into this role in particular, especially if you're looking for a product management role in a lot of the larger tech companies. But I think some of the
Mhm,
startups are also asking these types of questions to see your thought process. And the way you can practice it
mhm.
is through these mock interviews that you can set up with people around the world.
Oh, wow. Thank you. I did not know about that resource. I'm just learning so much during
Good.
this episode.
That's the purpose.
I love it. I love it. Thank you once again. And our listeners, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the STEM Career Path series. Make sure to rate, like, subscribe on all our platforms. Tell a friend to tell a friend. There are so many major keys and gems dropped in this episode, so I know it will be beneficial for everyone. If you want to get into the field or just break into tech in general, follow us on Instagram at the When in STEM podcast. And if there's a particular career that you want us to cover, or if you would like to be a guest, send us a message. But until next time, enjoy the rest of your week. Be great and go out and win in STEM. Bye, everyone.
Win.